Global Americans is pleased to present yet another of our working group papers in our ongoing series on U.S. Ecuador relations. This paper, like the rest of this series, covers the U.S. Ecuador relationship at this important historical moment, with this paper giving particular coverage to the questions of trade and investment conditions and what can be learned from previous trade relationships established by the United States with its Latin American neighbors. We look forward to sharing with you the rest of our working papers, a product of collaboration between the Global Americans team and our world-class high-level working group. These will come out in the coming weeks. They'll cover a diverse range of topics central to the United States-Ecuador relationship. Until then, we hope you enjoyed this Global Americans report.
This last report covers trade relations between the US and countries from this hemisphere, and it shows that in general, deepening trade relations in accordance with modern provisions has led to an increase in trade flows, economic growth, and bilateral investments.
The evidence is clear. Deeper U.S.-Ecuador engagement will be critical to increasing trade flows, economic growth, and development, and in the process, improving labor conditions while raising earnings and creating jobs. Deepening this engagement is critical for all stakeholders.
Strong labor and environmental provisions can satisfy both U.S. and Ecuadorian stakeholders who are skeptical of trade, and these provisions would be important to the bilateral relationship generally. A potential deepening of U.S.-Ecuador trade ties could satisfy traditional critics of trade by including strong protections for labor and the environment, will be also considering provisions that compensate those who have been displaced by trade.